Today on the official Marvel podcast, we'll hear from the stars of Marvel Studios Thunderbolts, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Geraldine Viswanathan, Pullman, and Sebastian Stan.
I think some of the best scenes that we've had were the scenes where you're not really sure if these guys are going to make it. And I think that it's interesting for me sort of figuring out which one of them I will get along with better.
And Marvel Animation's Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man composers, Zach Robinson and Leo Birenberg, discuss what it was like creating music for the show.
We were really inspired by anime music, specifically just the melodies that kind of come with that style of music and the energy in particular.
Plus, we'll share everything you need to know about the comic book history of the Red Room and its infamous Black Widow program.
I'm Preeti Chibber.
I'm Quinn Lamar.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
Okay, Preeti, did you see Thunderbolts yet?
Obviously, it was a blast. There is nothing like seeing a Marvel movie in a packed theater.
100%. And there's so much I want to say, but I don't want to give anything away for listeners who need to get their butts to the movies if they have not already.
That is an order, listeners. Last week, we heard from stars like Florence Pugh and David Harbour as they shared some of their experiences from the set of Marvel Studios Thunderbolts. If you haven't already, I highly recommend going back and listening.
Oh, for sure. Though come right back because this week, we've got the remaining members of the cast, including Sebastian Stan, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Geraldine Viswanathan, and Pullman on the show.
And speaking of returning, Sebastian Stan reprises his role as Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, in Thunderbolts. Here's Sebastian on his initial reaction once he learned that his character was in this new chapter of the MCU.
Well, I loved the group of people that was being assembled. And then I thought the concept of the Thunderbolts was really fun and exciting because there's such a crazy group and they're sort of unpredictable and then they have their own language, so to speak. They're still figuring out who they are and dealing with these complex issues, the past and parts of themselves. And then I guess I've already gone through that, so I can sort of impart that wisdom and it gives me another sense of purpose. But yeah, you definitely don't get to do a character for this long, and you certainly don't get to do it at this level. You don't get to do it in movies, and you don't get to grow with the character yourself personally, and then it's always kind of coming back to it, and you're bringing sort of another piece of the puzzle along with you because you've been on a journey, you're adding new things to the character. So that's really exciting every time because I always know that even though there's a familiarity, it will be different because I'm different. And even though we've had different directors and so on, it's been nice to know that at least you know what you're clicking back into. And personally, of course, for me, it's really wild to think that Marvel came into my life in 2010. My life just would not be the same without him. So it's definitely a double whammy.
And despite having been a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for 15 years, Sebastian says that this time around, we'll get to see a different side of Bucky since we last saw him in Marvel Studios' Captain America: Brave New World.
Yeah, it's interesting because we started out in such a dark place with him, obviously in Winter Soldier and Civil War, and it was always interesting to me, and I was very curious about how we would discover him later on. What would be the new parts of him that we would be exploring? And this was sort of a fun idea, which really was super fun to play with, and this idea that he's trying something totally the opposite of who he is.
That said, the overall tone of Thunderbolts is also a bit of a departure from previous MCU projects. Here's Sebastian on the tone set by the movie's director, Jake Schreier.
I'm always down for down and dirty because my foundation was in Winter Soldier and Civil War. And Winter Soldier for me tonally was very specific. And so I felt with the show, with Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then now this, I felt I was kind of in familiar territory. So I love when they allow me to play a little bit of the duality because I think that's what I love about Bucky. Like, I love that even though he's come a long way, he's still carrying his whole life experience with him. He's not a totally different person. He's always going to have those things that made him who he is, good and bad. And it gives a different flavor to the choices that you make as an actor. And in this, it feels like this is a very similar group. They could all go both ways. And I think Jake did a really amazing job keeping this thing grounded, fun, and also its own thing. It really feels like it's its own thing. And that I'm grateful for that, because then it gives me a new life, but also just, I think, it introduces a new group in a very different way.
He's right that the Thunderbolts' introduction to the MCU isn't your typical classic Marvel team-up. It's a lot more nuanced than that. But for Sebastian Stan, that's what makes this movie uniquely fun.
Oh, of course. I think some of the best scenes that we've had were the scenes where you're not really sure if these guys are going to make it. And I think that it's interesting for me sort of figuring out which one of them I will get along with better. Who's the real ringleader that I have to get on my side? Obviously, inherently, I would have thought, it would be Elena. But then I have this history with Wyatt, with John Walker from Falcon Winter Soldier. So that's sort of interesting to play with a little bit, because there's a lot of unexplored things between us, things we haven't said, and we have that history. Then you've got Alexi and Ava, who are their own sort of very different kind of language and characters, and that's the fun of it.
Sebastian Stan is also set to reunite with another star from Marvel Studios, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Here's Julia, who plays Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, on getting to work with Sebastian Stan again.
Well, at the start of the film, Sebastian, playing Bucky, is in D.C., and he's on to Valentina. He's really on to her, or so he thinks. And then Wyatt, of course, who plays John Walker, wow, I mean, his past is riddled with problems, and he's bitter as hell.
After appearing in other movies like Marvel Studios' Black Widow, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is excited to finally be able to pay off some of her previous cameos.
I played her originally sort of like she was somebody who is 3 steps ahead of everybody else. So you think she's thinking one way, but actually she's thinking another way you haven't thought of. And she's a character who knows what you're thinking before you think it. And so that's really a lot of information to sink your teeth into. She might be bad, but she might be good. And it's a little bit unclear, except you can be assured that she's ultimately working towards best serving herself. And that really came to fruition in Thunderbolts. Valentina has skeletons in her closet, and those skeletons are these Thunderbolt characters.
Valentina is set to return alongside her new assistant Mel, played by Geraldine Viswanathan.
We just had a ball together. Geraldine is like just a fun-loving person, and we were goofing around all the time. And we had a couple of moments that were just hilarious. She's just a good time. I was really happy to be able to work with her and to discover her love of dill pickle potato chips. We hung out long enough on set. We tried all the snacks. Dill pickle was it.
I'm with Geraldine. Dill pickle flavored snacks are the best. But according to Geraldine, it sounds like she also had a blast working with Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, absolute dream come true. I think it's, a massive reason why I wanted to do this, just to get to hang out with Julia. She's such an idol of mine, and I think getting to work with her and spend time with her, I even respect her more now as a person as well. I just think she's brilliant and just the most perfect woman in America. She was so warm and just instantly, and I really knew that, it was going to be easy and fun with her.
For Geraldine, her role as Mel also marks her debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Here's Geraldine on her reaction once she learned from Thunderbolts director Jake Schreier that she was joining the MCU.
I think I'll always remember very distinctly getting the call from Jake. I was deep into having like one of the worst cases of the flu that I've ever had. And Jake called me and was like, would you want to do this? And I was like, what? It just felt like a very, very surreal. I think, I grew up watching Marvel movies and it just felt like this sort of a pinnacle of what you can do as an actor. And the fact that it just kind of like came together very quickly and easily was just like surreal.
Geraldine also got the chance to work alongside costume designer Sonia Hayes. Sonia has previously worked on other Marvel Studios projects like Spider-Man No Way Home and Captain Marvel. Geraldine spoke about what it was like working with Sonia to develop the look of her character, Mel.
The wardrobe element was a big part of it because, she's a young professional, she's good at her job and she's showing up, but she's also a young person. And we also wanted to like show her personality in subtle ways and not just sort of be like a corporate girly. And so it was really cool getting to like collaborate on mostly the jewelry and sort of like plant little Easter eggs and kind of like signal some very subtle things to the audience through the jewelry.
Geraldine Viswanathan isn't the only one making their MCU debut in Thunderbolts.
Yeah, I mean, my first introduction to this whole world was through Jake.
That's Louis Pullman. He plays Bob in Thunderbolts. And when Jake Schreier reached out to him about the role, Louis was invited on set to get a feel for the project.
And it was really exciting. And I really was trying to, tamp down my excitement because I didn't have the role yet. But it was a very exciting take on this world because Jake was very adamant about trying to maintain the integrity of the world while also grounding it in a certain way and kind of making it smaller in certain areas, which I think he did very successfully, And I think there's a lot of elements that I hadn't seen in a lot of Marvel movies, but then it also keeps all of my favorite parts about Marvel movies in it. So it's definitely its own thing while still staying true to Marvel.
Another aspect of this movie that intrigued Louis was the exploration of trauma and how these characters are forced to tackle it.
Definitely. I mean, Jake was very aware of wanting to make those themes very much, the driving force behind the movie without making it feel like a PSA or something, And it was fun to dive into. It was really challenging, emotional place to live in for some of those scenes. But, I was a social work major, and when I first started doing film after I got out of college, I had this idea that I would, that I would somehow be able to maybe meld those two things together, social work and film. And I think this movie is one of the first opportunities I've really gotten to do that. And I guess by that, I mean like having a message, a strong message that I really agree with, that it may be a lot of kids out there aren't being told or don't have a space to hear, and having it delivered in a way that is really effective and in a world that, because they say a book can change your life, a movie can change your life. I really agree with that. If you watch the right movie at the right place in your life, it can absolutely change your life. And so I think this whole movie and the message behind it and, how one deals with grief and what community and what friendship and support looks like, I think to be able to put that into a movie in the way that we've done is deeply meaningful to me.
Outside of the film's themes, here's what Louis walked away with from working on this project.
I think one of the biggest things that I'm taking away is I think that with the movie, of this stature, the fear is that it's going to be like a machine that you're going to be lost in or something, which it was not at all. Every person that worked on this held space for everyone's ideas, and I think that that's what they've done on every Marvel movie, and that's why they've been, such a great success, is because they aren't these machines. They have the resources, but they're also very creatively incorporative to, each artist and to each person in every department. And so everyone has a say, which is really exciting, because everyone who's working on these really is excited to be a part of them. And so to be able to also to make your mark on them in some way, small or large, is really gratifying, So I really took that away. I took away a lot of, stunts was a big one on this. I took a lot of confidence away from that, just knowing that given the right team of collaborators, I can learn and adapt, pretty quickly. And then also, I think I learned a lot about energy conservation on this one. I think there was so many different, assets and skills required to do this. You got to pace yourself, and learning how to pace yourself and something like that. Because you watch these movies and it is incredible what everyone's doing. Like Florence, she is a beast, and I don't know. So just learning and watching other people that have done this before and watching from them how you kind of energetically kind of know when to go full tilt and know when to be still in this kind of hibernation, kind of idling state.
Ultimately, though, here's what Louis Pullman hopes audiences connect with when they get to see Thunderbolts.
There are many elements in this movie that are universally relatable. I think that a lot of this deals with mental health, and whether that's, an obvious theme from, the outside looking in, or whether you watch it and you kind of feel it afterwards. But I think for me, there's a great opportunity here for really helping people. I know that might sound cheesy, but I think the story is really well designed in a way that it feels like a warm hug for somebody who might need it, and I feel like there's a lot of really dark themes in here that are, I think everyone deals with, I think I've dealt with, I'm sure you've dealt with, and some of these, some big blockbusters maybe aren't bold enough to talk about it, or to try and tackle it. And so for this movie to be doing that is a brave thing, and I think a respectable thing. And then I also think people are just going to be wildly entertained, and they're going to have a damn good time.
Marvel Studios Thunderbolts is now playing only in theaters, so get your tickets today if you haven't already. Okay, now that you've gotten your Thunderbolts hit of serotonin, let's turn it over to one of our favorite teenage superheroes.
Or more like soon-to-be superhero. Marvel Animation's Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man takes us on Peter Parker's journey to becoming Spidey.
So what was it like coming up with the show's fantastic musical score? I spoke with composers Zach Robinson and Leo Birenberg about their creative process. Today, we're joined by the composers behind Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Zach Robinson and Leo Birenberg. It's great to have you here.
We are excited to be here.
We're stoked to be
We've
here.
entered the MCU and we're stoked about it.
Officially.
Hard launched into the MCU. It's awesome.
So before we sort of dive into the music piece of it, I have to know, as a huge Spider-Man fan myself, what was your relationship to Spider-Man prior to this?
It's really too bad that we can't show you a photo of Zach right now when he was a boy.
So I'll pull it up as Leo's talking.
It is incredible. So Zach's going to pull up this treat. I think I was I like Spider-Man, but I find characters interesting when there's a lot of sort of iterations on them over the years. And Spider-Man, as we all know, has had many, even just in the last 25, not to mention everything that came before that. So it's kind of interesting creatively, just in there's always going to be a new take, but they always kind of follow those certain pillars of the character.
I'll show you. So for the audience members that are not going to be seeing this, it's my mom holding me next to Spider-Man, and I'm about, I don't know, probably 2 younger, and I am screaming, crying. And it looks like it was my birthday party or something similar, and I am not having a good time And this Spider-Man also kind of looks like a janky Spider-Man, I gotta say. But so maybe that's what I was responding to. But I grew up like watching the '90s cartoon, and we were thrilled to just put our stamp on the music with him.
How did you find yourself working on the music for your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? Like, how does this project compare to some of your previous work?
Well, the thing about Zach and I is we like all of our projects to sound like insanely different and go as hard as possible in whatever direction we come up with. That's kind of like our thing, I guess, if we can say we have a thing. Like, we like to take a look at something, try to come up with a concept that no one else might come up with. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's like some weird avant-garde approach. It just means that like we want to draw from influences that we feel are like, I don't know, that should be unlocked to like get the fullest on our take of whatever we're watching. And then, you know, we try to go, we say the phrase like go hard a lot. Like, we want to put a lot of effort into the music and basically try to push the boundary of what we'll get away with to make sure that the music is kind of like a big stamp on the show and make sure that when people hear it, they know that it's that show and it couldn't be any other show and we wrote it. Like, that's kind of our goal when we're approaching anything.
And so when you're thinking about Spider-Man, like, what does Spider-Man sound like to you? What are the sorts of sounds or instruments you wanted to incorporate?
So
He swings
swinging?
around.
Yeah, swinging. A lot of swinging.
Swings around.
Like a whoosh.
In terms of just like the direction that we chose to go in, we were really inspired by anime music, specifically just the melodies that kind of come with that style of music and the energy in particular. We want the music to feel like youthful, and we want the music to feel like maybe even something Spider-Man would listen to, which I don't know has always been the case with scoring the character. So we imagined Spider-Man, Peter Parker watching anime and Peter Parker listening to lo-fi beats, studying, and like that was like our really like our visual inspiration besides the actual animation, and it got us pretty far. Like, we were really stoked at just like how that approach inspired us. And I did see a comment that made me really smile. That was like, someone asked like, where can I find more music like this? And someone made a really thoughtful response and just said, you know, there's a lot of video game soundtracks that have this, or like this anime here. And it was like all these influences that we were very aware of and that we grew up in. Now this kid is gonna listen to all that stuff, and maybe they're gonna, you know, get into scoring anime style music. It was awesome.
When you were thinking about that history of the music of Spider-Man, how do you, I mean, this is such a big question because, like, how do you even approach it from that perspective where you're like, this is a piece of his story. This is going to be a piece of his story in this, like, long history of musical themes.
Well, one, you have to tune out like the pressure a little bit. Like, you can't be like, oh my God, like all of the generations upon generations of Spider-Man music is like sitting on our shoulders, and like if our knees buckle, the brand is ruined forever. Like, no, you got to tune that out. And I think for us, we knew that we wanted a really strong, memorable theme that was like front and center, that would be like in kind of our end title piece and would weave its way all over the score. I mean, it's everywhere. And so like that's the first thing we did, and we worked very hard, workshopped that main title a lot, and I feel like honed in on a very strong melody, and that was just kind of the center, that's the beam that held everything else up. Once we have that, it's really easy to get creative and find different ways of using it. So that was just like the first riddle.
Talk to me about Lonnie Lincoln. Like, how did that theme come about?
Lonnie's theme is like the second biggest theme in the show. And we wrote it in that sequence of him walking home in the first episode. And there was this element to the show, I think, that is the city of New York as a setting is like a bit of a character. And it's like, I don't know, I think part of it has to do with the animation style. It just feels so like alive the way it's drawn. And I love it. And we wanted to find a way to like bring the New York into all the music, but I think like especially with Lonnie's stuff, it cut through like even more. And so we used like a trumpet. We were kind of trying to take jazz influences, which, as we know, already lends themselves to like a lo-fi hip hop setting, and then kind of lean into that and just like make it a little more lush and feel a little more polished and alive. I love that sequence. It is one of the first things we did. And if you go back and listen to that sequence and then watch through season 1 again, I think you will, identify that theme just as much as the main Spider-Man theme all over the place. And there's like an awesome bit as it goes on where like, it's working in counterpoint with the Spider-Man theme because like they're teaming up and it's awesome. Like, so, you can do a lot with when you set stuff up over the whole season like that.
I mean, it's interesting because the score does have such a wide range of sound. I love hearing you talk about it from like a character perspective and sort of how you have this superhero team and you have all these kids and this group of kids who have to work together, and the music sort of has to do the same thing, obviously. But how do you find the balance between all the genres to create a cohesive score?
I guess just like it's a lame answer, but just like experience of like doing this. Like, no, it's but you've identified something that is very difficult and, very unique, I think, to film music as an art form. Like you can write a symphony or a concept album or something in any style that uses all sorts of different material and brings it back. And, Zach and I have studied all those things over the years and like wrestled with them on other projects. And I think you just kind of get a feel for how to combine genres that might not otherwise be combined. And then I think where we especially excel or find joy in is like then figuring out how to make it like as cinematic as possible. So like lo-fi is awesome. It's not always the most cinematic thing. It can't like fill a giant sweeping shot of a city. And I think like what we really enjoy is taking all these influences, spinning them together, and then giving it that like magic silver screen juju to make it feel like a movie. It's not a movie, but it might as well be a movie. It is a movie. And I know that really excites us, and I think it's a bit of like a North Star that's just like, when in doubt, like, what do you want to sit there and watch? You know, like you want to feel like you're being taken along for a ride. You want to feel like you're swinging through the buildings with Peter. And so I think we're just very attuned to that and always looking for outlets.
It is interesting to talk about our inspirations on this stuff. And then also, we are scoring a Marvel show. So there is that DNA too that is intrinsic to the property. And like, that's why we needed to have like a big soaring theme so that you also kind of hear it and you say like, this fits in that world. And I think that something that we're also able to do is like, even if the genres kind of like veer, one scene sounds different than the next scene or whatever, it's still our voice. And I hope that listeners can hear that.
Zach and Leo, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you guys
it.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Some Marvel fans may already know Natasha Romanoff, Yelena Belova, and Bucky Barnes all have connections to the Red Room. So what's the comic book history behind this notorious location?
Let's get better acquainted with this deadly program. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy secret Soviet-Russian ride.
Time for a little role play. Let's say you're a 1940s Soviet military scientist and you decide to build a secret assassin training facility. What are you going to call it?
Oh, that's easy. The Red Room.
Yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with something better, right? Like red was the primary color of the USSR's flag and the symbolic color of the Soviet Union in general. In terms of imagery, red is the classic choice if you want to represent blood. And in professional killer jargon, having red in one's ledger is a euphemism for having used deadly force.
And what's even extra chilling is Red Room backwards is murder.
If you're trying to say that in a bad Scottish accent, maybe, but no.
Murder. I don't know. I think it works.
It really doesn't. Anyway, before we get into the sordid history of Marvel Comics' very own Assassin Factory, we first need a quick mention of the group that created it.
Department X. Yes. Way back during World War II, after Captain America became the tide-turning superstar of the war, the Soviet Union decided it needed its own super soldier. Thus began the clandestine Department X. Unfortunately, their first big attempt was less super soldier than super assassin. Department X abducted Captain America's young sidekick, Bucky Barnes, and turned him into the mind-controlled killing machine, the Winter Soldier.
That was bad news for Bucky and for all the people the Winter Soldier went on to murder.
Murder!
Stop it. While it was unfortunate for the rest of the world, the generals and scientists behind Department X were thrilled because the Winter Soldier was, for them, a massive success. And so Department X was expanded into a new project, the Black Widow Ops program.
And so, the Red Room was born, an assassin training school housed in a hidden facility. For its inaugural class, the Red Room recruited 28 young orphan girls. And I hope you could hear the air quotes around recruited, because by recruited, I basically mean kidnapped. They specifically used young girls with the idea that they would be the ultimate undetectable operatives, spies and killers that no one would ever suspect. And among that first class of 28 was the girl who would become the Red Room's most famous graduate, Natalia Romanova.
Now, if you're thinking that maybe that name sounds very similar to that of Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow of Avengers fame, yeah, they're the same person. Natasha's original name was Natalia Alianova Romanova. And when the Red Room took her back in the 1940s, she and those other 27 girls were subjected to years of grueling, often torturous instruction in acrobatics, stealth tactics, marksmanship, martial arts.
Plus, lots of lessons in things like speaking English and learning American accents and mannerisms. Skills that would help them blend in seamlessly among the people they would be sent to kill. The Red Room would even bring in a special guest tutor from time to time, the Winter Soldier.
But turning these girls into Black Widows, as they would be called in the field, involved more than just a physical and mental education. The trainees were also subjected to biochemical enhancements, like having their blood laced with a sort of super soldier serum, similar to what they'd used on the Winter Soldier. In addition to boosting their strength and agility, the serum would also keep them young and heal wounds rapidly.
Which explains how the Black Widow can currently be over 90 years old and still not have a single gray hair on her head.
Maybe she's born with it. Or maybe it's secret Soviet life expansion super soldier chemicals.
Maybe it's that. And they also messed with their memories. The Red Room scientists implanted the girls with false memories so they'd remember none of the horrific things done to them during their training. As far as the girls knew, they'd simply spent years training to dance at the Bolshoi Ballet, which, if we're being fair, is a totally believable cover story for a bunch of super buff young women. Ballerinas will kick your butt.
So, these girls become top spies and assassins for Department X, doing its dirty work around the globe. But eventually, after run-ins with American heroes like Captain America, Iron Man, and Hawkeye, one Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, is convinced to defect from Russia to work with the American intelligence agency, S.H.I.E.L.D., and ultimately to join the Avengers. It would take years for Natasha to recover her real memories and learn the true extent of what she'd been subjected to as a child.
But the Red Room and its Black Widow Ops program carried on, and its new recruits, among whom was a young woman named Yelena Belova, were taught to hate the wicked traitor Natasha Romanoff. Yelena made it her goal to outdo Natasha by every measurable metric, and longed to be the one to eventually take the traitor down. But Natasha, knowing the kind of life Yelena must have also been through, fought back not with deadly force, but with sympathy and psychology. Ultimately, Natasha convinced her to defect from the Widow program and forge a destiny of her own choosing. Yelena then took on the name of White Widow, making it part of her mission to help other ex-widows make new lives for themselves.
Still, the Red Room continued its diabolical mission. Red Room agents abducted another name you might recognize, Nadia Pym, daughter of Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man. For years, Hank believed his daughter was dead. Over time, it became clear to the Red Roomers that Nadia Pym was a genius like her dad. So they shifted her training from combat to science, hoping she'd be able to invent all sorts of new ways for them to carry on their grand tradition of turning little kids into human weapons. But once Nadia learned of her true parentage, she was inspired to focus her superior intellect on engineering an escape. She freed herself and re-entered the world as the new Wasp.
And she had such a great relationship with the original Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, that she didn't just take on her superhero name, she took her last name too.
So Nadia Pym became Nadia Van Dyne.
A happy ending for Nadia.
We love to see it.
Okay, so the Red Room was going through a bit of a slump. They'd lost 3 of their best trainees, and funding for their projects was running low. They needed a quick cash infusion, so they sold their anti-aging formula to a nefarious biotech company. But part of the deal was that no one else could ever get access to that formula, which meant eliminating every drop of it that was currently out in the wild, including the ones running through the veins of the existing Black Widows. Covert agents started killing off the original 28, successfully until they came for Natasha Romanoff. Our Black Widow, the Black Widow, fought back and ended up killing the head of the Red Room. This act did, however, lead to her being branded a fugitive, though she evaded capture thanks to a little help from Yelena Belova.
The Red Room keeps trying for a comeback. Most recently, they attempted to move the project stateside, opening up a Red Room facility in Westchester, New York. In this new location, they mixed their training program with a bit of cloning science, creating clone duplicates of their greatest graduates like Natasha and Yelena. But as soon as the real Natasha and Yelena got wind of the operation, they shut it down, literally destroying the New York Red Room.
I guess that's what you get when you train people to be killers and then give them a reason to really, really hate you.
True, the assassin game is a rough business.
And like they say, business can be murder.
Nope, that's it. I'm leaving. Done. Cue the music. Before She-Hulk ever walked into a courtroom, on TV that is, there was the trial of the Incredible Hulk, directed by and starring Bill Bixby as David Banner. On this day in 1989, the made-for-television movie aired for the first time. The film is a sequel to the Incredible Hulk 1970s TV series and features the Hulk, played by Lou Ferrigno, and fellow superhero Daredevil, played by Rex Smith. In the trial of the Incredible Hulk, Banner is down in his luck and heads to a new city in hopes of starting over. However, it turns out that the city is under the control of the power-hungry Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, played by John Rhys Davies. As Banner attempts to rescue a woman being attacked by Fisk's men, he transforms into the Hulk. Don't make him angry. You wouldn't like him when he's angry. Banner is arrested and charged with a crime he didn't commit. Enter defense attorney Matt Murdock. Together, Daredevil and Hulk team up to take on the corrupt Fisk. Incredible Hulk co-creator Stan Lee made his first of many uncredited cameos in the 1989 film as the jury foreman. Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno would next go on to star in 1990's The Death of the Incredible Hulk. Though there are many iterations to love of the Hulk, Bixby and Ferrigno's version has a special place in the hearts of Marvel fans, young and old alike.
Next week on the official Marvel podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with Thunderbolts scriptwriter Joanna Kalo and costume designer Sonia Hayes.
The idea was that it's a group of misfits. So the idea was not to make them feel like a group. The one thing that is sort of a common denominator of all of them is color, and to make them look much more approachable.
That's it for this episode. If you haven't already, make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening. It helps other Marvel fans find the show.
Yes, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode.
This episode was hosted by Preeti Chibber and myself, Quinn Lamar.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores, with additional writing by Christopher Healy.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey. Mixed by Emma Munger. Theme music by Ida Akbal. Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.